Imagine this. A container ship is halfway across the Indian Ocean, but instead of going straight, it is forced to reroute hundreds of miles just to avoid a conflict zone. Or picture a factory in Europe where everything is ready to go. The workers, the demand, the customers are waiting. But then the production is forced to halt because of a microchip that got stuck in Vietnam and never arrives. Or eventually think of an AI scheduler trusted to move thousands of shipments across the globe, suddenly misrouting because its data pipeline was tampered with. So supply chain is the hidden muscle of our modern economy. Over 80% of global trade volume still moves by the sea, making maritime routes the veins of world commerce. But they are fragile. They are vulnerable to geopolitics, cyberattacks, climate risks, and overdependent on specific technologies. So in this episode, I want to unpack the supply chain management topic through the lenses of geopolitics, technology, cybersecurity, and economics. We will explore how these forces are colliding, how governments and businesses are scrambling to defend against the disruption, and what recent events are teaching us. But let's start with something. Let's start with the basic. So what is supply chain? What are the dependencies in supply chain and what are the risks? So at its core, a supply chain is the full network that moves raw material through transformation into a finished good. And these are transported, they are stored in warehouses and then delivered to the customer. So this seems simple, right? In definition, feels like. But the reality is that this is a web of dependencies and many of them are invisible. So suppose that you're designing a product and suddenly you need copper, you need rare earths, you need specialty polymers, chipsets. The thing is, you're not controlling most of it. You depend normally on tier 2 or tier 3 suppliers that are often based in far off location, and some of them are going through political instabilities or hit by a climate disaster, or they're facing new export restriction. Who knows, right? Iran. This is basically letting your whole supply chain vulnerable, and of course, it put at stake your business. So numbers show this fragility. In 2024, the global maritime trade grew by 12.4%, hitting 12.3 billion tons. But the forecast for 2025 are showing a slowdown to 0.5%. The United Nations are warning that geopolitical, regulatory, and operation headwinds are biting. And then there are the choke points. The Strait of Malacca alone carries a quarter of all global trade. The Red Sea corridor, 12% of world trade, nearly a third of all containers in the world. And when this is disrupted, ships are sailing around Africa, adding weeks. And that's why the average maritime haul distances have stretched from about 4,800 miles in 2018 to over 5,200 miles in 2024. And this is then quite concerning, right, for our companies. And there is another phenomenon that McKinsey is calling the geometry of global trade. According to this, the geopolitical distance of countries making trade among them is shrinking, is decreasing. And this means that countries normally trade 7% more with politically aligned partners. So in other words, the trade flows aren't just economic, they are political and increasingly shaped by alliances. So supply chains are not just about moving boxes, they are about timing, buffering, redundancy, compliance, and coordination across the continents. But now, after looking into SCM as a whole, let's look into its digital spine, the backbone, the technology, the data, and the system. Because the fact is that the real machinery of supply chains, of course, there are ships, there are cranes, but today everything is about digital. ERP system, enterprise resource planning systems like SAP S/4HANA, Oracle NetSuite, Microsoft Dynamics. This is where companies run procurements, orders, payments, and compliance. And then we have transport management systems like Blue Yonder or Manhattan Associates that are handling the shipping orchestration. Warehouse systems power automated picking, packing, and fulfillment. All of these relies on connectivity. So there are GPS, there are satellites, cellular lines, edge devices, IoT sensors, RFID, 5G. It's a ton of technology that is deployed for the healthy and successful management of supply. So each crane movement, in fact, is logged. Each port operation is simulated with digital twins. But now let's break it down. Just to make one example at a time. IoT. So let's take a container of vaccines. There are sensors inside that are monitoring the temperature, the humidity, the vibration, and even the door openings. And they are communicating through LP1 protocols like LoRaWAN or 5G. Edge computing. Instead of sending everything to the cloud, devices like the Dell Edge gateways or the HP Edge lines are processing the data locally. If a cooling system slips 2 degrees off, the edge can trigger alerts instantly, even if satellite bandwidth is spotty. Ships deploy NVIDIA Jetson or Cisco IoT Edge routers for the same reason. Then you got hyperscale clouds, AWS IoT, Core, Azure IoT Hub, Google Cloud IoT. And they are aggregating billions of data points into supply chain twins like AWS twins. Ports, the harbors, the ports, right, where you see these containers, they're rolling out private 5G. Rotterdam uses over 1,000 IoT sensors on crane and yard vehicles, cutting turnaround by about 20%. And the warehouse, in warehouses, technologies like Amazon Robotics are boosting efficiency by 40%. And all of this fits AI, forecasting with long short-term memory for anomaly detection. By 2027, Gartner expected 70% of supply chains will use AI-driven automation at scale. Machine learning for the provisioning of demand, in automation for the management of the orders, inventories, and logistics, predictive analytics to optimize the times, the costs, and the risks. So this has definitely a lot of implications for our companies, right? So first of all, operative efficiency, because it reduces the errors and the time of response. It increases resilience because it has higher capacity for adaptation to interruptions or variation in the market. And of course, competitivity, because who is not adopting these technologies is facing the risk of staying behind, right? So, but every new layer that we have just discussed is adding dependency and cyber risks. So supply chain cyber threats are multiplying. Maersk, so the big company for logistics, is reporting 27 incidents in logistics between July 2023 and July 2024. Legacy industrial control systems, which are normally not monitored, patched infrequently, they present easy targets once attackers have lateral access. Ports are becoming cyber battlegrounds. We spoke about the Rotterdam port, which has a private 5G and runs over 1,000 IoT sensors on cranes, vehicles, shipping containers. which is good. But on the other side, it's offering the flank to cyber attacks. In Hamburg, the port is integrating edge machine learning to detect exactly the tampering attempts at the gates. The more digitized they are running on 5G, IoT, edge servers, the more attractive they are as targets. A single ransomware attack against a port operator can halt billions in trade. In the maritime domain, ships and ports are under rising cyber pressure. Mariners report incidents like GPS spoofing and ransomware affecting control systems. The complexity of the sea environment, disconnected networks, intermittent communication, varied ownership models, regulatory fragmentation. This makes defense harder. So, well, now we have also the topic about zero trust, of course, because the zero trust concept at the edge is becoming mandatory. This means the micro-segmentation of the IoT devices, the hardware roots of trust through Intel SGX, ARM Trust Zone, and the secure gateways. Vendors like Fortinet and Palo Alto are embedding OT-aware firewalls into supply chain hubs. So one wake-up call, and this is something that has happened very recently, is that Jaguar Land Rover, right? So recently, in about September 2025, they got a big cyber attacks and forced the UK factory to shut down, showing how vulnerable automotive supply chains are when their ERP and IoT layers go dark. And even led, in this case, the UK government to guarantee 1.5 billion in loans just to stabilize its ecosystem. So that's unbelievable, the risk that cyber attacks can have. So, but now let's look into geopolitics, right? So what is happening overall? And supply chains today are being redrawn by trade blocks, controls, and conflicts. What forces, I ask, are reshaping supply chains geopolitically? First of all, trade blocks and realignment. BCG forecasts that North America may cohere into a resilient trade bloc. The EU will pivot towards strategic partners, and China will seek deeper ties with the Global South. The Global South, which is instead led by India and Southeast Asia, is climbing the industrial ladders, demanding more diversified links and asserting more bargaining power. Second is the export controls, sanctions, and rule of origin. In sectors like semiconductors, biotech, or eventually advanced manufacturing, the governments are increasingly regulate not just the goods, but the entire production ecosystems. Because sanctions are here applied to Russia, restrictions are on advanced ship flows to China, and stricter origin verification rules all force companies to rewire their supplier maps. Third, the friendshoring and the reshoring. Many governments now prefer suppliers that are politically aligned, as we see, or let's say geographically closer. But the economics are tricky, and aggressive reshoring could shrink the trade by about 18% and cost GDP in affected economies up to 12% according to the OECD modeling. So the IMF has warned that friendshoring might reduce the global output by about 2%, and emerging markets outside major blocs could face outsized losses. Fourth, the conflicts and the choke points. We have discussed already about the Red Sea, right? And let's talk about this Red Sea crisis, for example, that is slashing containers flow through that corridor by about 90% in some months, forcing many ships around Africa, adding days, cost, and fuel. So the Suez transit count fell from 2,068 ships in November 2023 to 877 in late 2024. So the ship owners are also adapting, because these ultra-large container ships which were built are dropping now. What they want is mid-sized vessels that are making a comeback because they're seen more flexible in uncertain times. So now, if we look at our companies, what they shall do? Because ahead lies a landscape of risks, of adaptation and also tension. They need to evaluate the different scenarios. They need to understand how the geopolitics is working. What are the policies that also the government can support them with by ring-fencing their commerce, but ensuring that there is no retaliation, right? So all in all, we're talking about a very complex scenario. And here the board need to be very, very aware about what is going to happen. Supply chains are no longer just about efficiency. They are about power. They are about trust. They are about sovereignty and resilience. Every container that sails, every ship that moves, every tariff that lands, it all tells us where alliances are shifting and where risks are brewing. So I thank you very much for your time and for watching this podcast. I hope it was interesting and it's insightful for you. I invite you to click on subscribe for getting more of these videos, and I look forward to have you here for one more topic that we will look into together. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.